Hello everyone, welcome to MOG Sundays. Today we're closing this year's MOG Sunday sessions with an exceptional duo, Anand Gandhi and Zain Memon from the MOG Studios. Before we begin the session, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on what this year has meant for the Museum of Goa as well. This year MOG turned 10 and we're reminded of how we've continued to grow into a space that has constantly brought to you conversations that contribute to today's very important discourses. And we brought to you experts from art, architecture to air traffic control who've continued to contribute to important conversations that are currently shaping our society as well. And right now we're starting a community fundraising initiative which is there. So if you feel like you've been a part of MOG Sundays and you've taken back a conversation that has helped you think and act, I urge you to support us so that we can continue having these conversations here every week. And moving on to our speakers for today, it is my pleasure to introduce Anand Gandhi, a polymath filmmaker and public intellectual who's ushered in India's new wave of cinema. He has created culture-shaping projects across media. His debut feature, Ship of Theseus, won India's National Award for Best Film, India's equivalent to an Academy Award for Best Picture. It was hailed by the UK Critics Circle as life-changing, collected major festival prizes at Transylvania, Tokyo, BFI London, and was released by Disney and Netflix. His mythological horror epic Tumbad, now regarded as a contemporary classic, opened Venice Critics Week and won Filmfare and Sitges Awards. It's also become one of the most watched genre films out of the region ever. Anand has produced non-fiction, television, and BR films that have won the Peabody, set anti-censorship precedents and been distributed by Prime Video, BBC, Hulu and Channel 4. He has also produced the best-selling board game Shasan, India's most played strategy board game. Anand is now co-creating the Maya narrative universe with Zain Memon. Zain Memon is a visionary game designer and transmedia creator who pioneered South Asia's modern tabletop renaissance. His political strategy board game, Shasan, is India's most played modern tabletop game. It has won Indicate's Social Impact Award and reached players in over 70 countries. Its sequel, Shasan Azadi, hailed as the blueprint for semi-cooperative game design, became the first tabletop game honored by Games for Change. Memon has established games as transformative learning systems through his approach to play as pedagogy. Memon spearheaded ElseVR, India's first VR journalism platform, partnering with UN, Oxfam, and Amnesty International. He produced the internationally celebrated documentary An Insignificant Man and Disney sci-fi comedy OK Computer. He led the world's largest open source film project, making Ship of Theseus freely available and setting a precedent in community-driven film distributions. He is now co-creating the Maya universe with Anand Gandhi. Today they will take us through this very universe. I kindly request everybody to put their phones on mute so that we may begin the session.
Thank you so much for coming out on a Sunday morning, that being holiday season, to hear us speak. Thank you. Anand and I have been working together for 14 years now, but 5 years ago we sat down and we asked ourselves some very hard questions. The first of which being, does anything that we do even matter? In its most absolute utilitarian impact on the world kind of way. Is anyone watching? Does it move the needle? Does it meet our objectives of trying to make the world a better place? Is there any efficacy? Because we keep lying to ourselves, we keep asking ourselves, telling ourselves that yes, we are moving needles forward. Are we doing so? Or should we move ahead and do something that has more direct impact? And that question led us down a few interesting paths. And I'll give you a few examples of what I mean. The job we assigned ourselves is the job of a storyteller. And while many of our peers take the job as merely entertainer, we look at it as someone who translates the greatest insights, breakthroughs that science has to offer, that philosophy has to offer, and make it more accessible for the world at large. Convert them into story, into parable. And this translating this, is there any real world example of it causing any impact? This journey took us down to the story of Swati Mohan. Now, Swati Mohan was a young kid growing up in India, in Jharkhand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Swati Mohan was growing up in Jharkhand and she saw something on television. She saw Star Trek. She saw someone who looked like her, who spoke like her, going to the farthest reaches of our galaxy and doing science in that show. She grew up knowing that that is something that she could do. 20 years later, Swati Mohan piloted the Mars rover that landed on Mars. That was only possible because as a kid, a story inspired her to do that. On the other hand,
the story that we speak about very often as an example of the impact of story and how consent is manufactured at scale. 25 years ago, in a very well-known story, a white man told the world that, at least his part of the world, that they have to fear this terrible man across the ocean who has horrible weapons and the will to use it against them, and trillions of dollars lost, millions of lives lost later. Oops, no weapons of mass destruction were discovered. And the weapon of mass destruction in this entire experience was the story that was told and believed at scale. Democracy is a story that we agree to agree on. Money is a story that we agree to agree on. It's a computational metaphor. It's a metaphor that we map out to a point that it starts becoming real, but it's a story.
Justice and law are stories. There is no sense of justice and law in the natural world. When you look out and early morning and it's beautiful sunrise over and you hear the birds chirping and the animals and the crickets going, you're hearing something beautiful. But what's actually happening? It's large amounts of sex and violence with no sense of justice whatsoever.
If we'd love to pose a question, what is the word where one life form decimates, murders another life form, and completely destroys its cellular infrastructure, replaces the victim's genetic code with its own genetic code? It's a very commonly understood
word. It's a word all of us use every day.
Sorry? Violence? Virus? Virus is one way of doing it, but pretty much
it's a
annihilation.
Getting closer.
Annihilation of the other, yes, annihilation of the other, murdering the other, annihilating the other, decimating its infrastructure, its cellular infrastructure.
And taking its genetic matter and making it your own. There's a transformation that happens also.
It's a parasitism also. Assimilation.
Eating. The word is eating. 4 billion years ago, something happened. The indifferent drift of entropy and chaos took a shape, took a form. I'd like to do one more exercise before I go into that. We keep workshopping these exercises just to kind of see which of our tools are useful. So let's do this other exercise. Think about the past, right? When we walked in and came on the stage, that was in the past. It doesn't exist right now. It exists in our memories. You can argue that it exists in that form. But that moment is not happening right now, so that moment is gone. The year that's gone is gone. 10 years have gone, centuries have gone. Everything leading up to this moment for 4 billion years of life on this planet is gone. It doesn't exist right now. So the past is over. The past doesn't exist. The future hasn't happened yet. When I started this sentence, this moment hadn't yet happened. The future hasn't happened yet. How thin is a sliver of present?
How small is now?
So somewhere along this Markovian physics, somewhere along this S1 leads to S2 kind of physics, information became thick. The ability to gather information from the past so that you can extrapolate what's happening in the present and predict what might be happening in the next second became life, became intelligence. And that's the birth of life, right? And as life began, it created somewhere along the beginning of life, an incredible strategy came along. Remarkable for its hustle, but not necessarily the best strategy life possibly could have used. Maybe there was another strategy on some other planet that could have been deployed. But this is a strategy that life deployed on this planet, which was to eat, which was to steal the genetic material of other beings who had stored and processed energy instead of making your own. Instead of photosynthesis and chemosynthesis, you murder another being and steal their energy. And life came up with this energy, this one strategy, and that triggered an arms race that went on for 4 billion years. A species grew claws, another became too fast, another became too good at hiding, too small, too big. Everything that we think of as diversity of nature, all the way to even social strategies like altruism, cooperation between species, cooperation between kin so that they can strategize the murder of what they are hunting better and faster. All of these strategies emerged as a consequence of that arms race. But far along that line, that consequence came a species, us, that had the ability to pierce the wheel of the future, aware of the future a bit farther than any other species before us. We could use hindsight, apply insight to it, and broaden the scope of our foresight.
The second major innovation that we did as life was being able to store information non-genetically. Until now, everyone was storing information genetically, which basically means you learn something if it's encoded in your genetic code, great, otherwise it dies with you. We figured out a way of transmitting it horizontally, transferring it vertically to the children after us. And we built a civilization unlike any species has ever seen. We have the ability to transmute the future and transmute the now in a way that has been unprecedented. This technology is called a story. This technology is us taking our memories collectively and converting them into science, converting them into policy, converting them into art. Now, are we wielding this technology in the best possible way? And if not, what can this technology do for us? It's a question we have been trying to answer.
So we started building a dream of a future. A few thousand years ago, we started imagining it would be wonderful if we can stop being like every other animal that has led up to us. If we can convert jungle Raj that we have inherited, a world that does not guarantee certainty, wellness, longevity, life, dignity, none of these attributes belong to the jungle. So we started dreaming a world where such properties are possible, such values are possible. Many among us, individuals emerged among us over thousands of years who proposed a simple idea. Hey, won't it be wonderful to be nice to your neighbor for a change? And more often than not, these individuals were nailed to trees for suggesting such a ludicrous thing. They're still being deported from nation states for suggesting it would be wonderful to be nice to each other for a change. But the idea has stuck. The idea stayed on because it's an incredible idea. It's an idea that's significantly plausible, and we have seen in this work in progress civilization. We are not civilized yet. Civilization is a dream, and we are a work in progress civilization. We are working toward it. We're still killing each other. We're still unequal. We still are not able to feed 1 billion among 1/7 of our population. We are not able to give access to dignity and wellness to more than half the humanity. So we are still work in progress as a species, as a civilized species, as this dream that was proposed a few thousand years ago. But that idea stuck, and that idea is the drive that has driven our stories, that has driven the stories that produced our policies and our political systems and our worldviews and our philosophies. This idea is where we have drawn our values from. So values, we know for sure, are not something that we inherit from the past. We imagine that we inherit them from the past, but we actually don't really. I mean, again, let's go to 1725, let's enter a cafe in Paris, and we find in this Parisian cafe a judge who's banging his fist on the table and insisting that women have souls, and everyone is mocking him for being so ridiculous. And if you ask him what are his most progressive ideas, what are the values that he holds most dear to his heart, and he says, well, I really insist that you must not beat up your slaves unless you really have to. His most progressive ideas would sound completely grotesque to our ears. So values are not something that we inherit from the past. They are not stuck in time. They're clearly nimble, they're clearly agile. So where are we drawing them from? Values are also clearly not by the same virtue inherent. Again, if you were going to go back to 8th century and like see values that people feel are inherent to them, are so ingrained in their intuition, they'll be grotesque to our ears. So they're not inherent, they're not inherited. So where do we get our values from?
Anyone? The values we hold so dear, like, where do we draw them from?
Religion.
So scripture has been historically one, yes.
But I just proved that, at least demonstrated that it's not entirely reliable. Yeah. So we definitely don't. Right now, most religions would find this gathering absolutely grotesque and sinful. So we are definitely not living by the values that religions have proposed. So where are we drawing our values from?
Stories.
Sure, but what are stories again? Like, where are the stories drawing? That's a tautological answer. It's like
Community, society,
collective narration.
Sure, community is again made up of individuals, and where are the individuals drawing the values from?
Our inner worlds, our experiences.
Yeah, but again, like if you go to the inner world of that judge in 1725, in the example that I just gave, he's absolutely convinced that, his inner world is absolutely convinced of the values that he's convinced of. So how are values progressing? How are they growing? How are they evolving?
The zeitgeist of it all.
Yeah, sure. These are tautological answers. We're just like moving around words and...
What do the values help us achieve?
Desires.
Okay.
To accomplish their wants and desires.
Values more often than not are the opposite of desires.
Thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not steal because your desire is to steal. Your desire is to, thou shalt not be gluttonous because your desire is to be gluttonous. You'll get diabetes if you be gluttonous today.
But are they really progressing? I don't agree with that.
Okay. You want to live in the jungle?
First of all, the jungle is not such a bad place, given that we're living in the built-up city and killing each other.
Right.
But
we are not. Here we are, right? Like here we are.
Statistically, we are killing lesser of each other.
Statistically, we are killing much lesser of each other than animals do in jungles.
Statistically, no lesser human.
But by the way, I'm completely fine with the argument that some of us might want to go back and live in jungles, and you're welcome to. I just wonder why the hypocrisy of not going back in jungle and sitting in a civilized environment where there is policy, where there is discourse, where there is dialogue, where there are artifacts of civilization and civilizational values, and romance the jungle. Why not live in the jungle altogether? If jungle is such a beautiful place, the reason for that is there is some kind of intellectual sleight of hand there, because jungle is not indeed the most incredible place to live in. We have come a long way from jungle because there is uncertainty in jungle. Jungle is built on the premise of, like I said, eating. You either get eaten or you eat, and that's really the premise of jungle. Now, you think you can negotiate with a predator an idea of cooperation? I would invite you to, but I doubt that it's possible by any worldview, under any framework of thinking. So that's why we build civilizations. We build civilizations for more certainty. We build civilizations so we can take away the vagaries of violence and predation that we have inherited from our jungle past. We have not even entered building the argument for our framework, because we are now arguing facts. So if we have to argue facts, it will be a while before we start building the framework or the premise that we wanted to present. But I don't want it to be kind of hijacked by having to kind of argue facts, so that let's kind of jump ahead. Also, Zain and I are just coming out of flu and COVID, so that's why we are a little slow in building our argument. Excuses for that. But basically, we thought that we were pretty convinced that we inherit our values not from the past, but from the future. The future that we simulate subconsciously, constantly. Each one of us carries a vision for how to make life better for ourselves, for our kin, for our community, for our species, for life at large, each one of us carries a vision, carries a dream that is not true yet, that is not plausible yet, that is not possible yet, there is no evidence that it's ever been possible. But each one of us carries this ability to simulate a future. Like we established in the beginning, that the very definition of intelligence is the ability to predict what's going to happen in the next second. A bacterium does that, a dog does that, a dolphin does that. Every species, the definition of life itself rests on the ability to be able to pierce the veil of what's happening in the next second, what could be happening.
Yeah, and then we collectively negotiate this future. We say, okay, what does that future look like for our kids? What does that future look like for us? And there are disagreements and negotiations, and there's pragmatic middle ground that we reach on. And then we sit down and say, okay, if this is the future that most of us are aspiring to, what does the route look like? What behaviors will allow us to reach this future?
Which gives us policies, which gives us law, which gives
and
us
our value system as a whole.
And which gives us our value systems. Values are the crucible where policies are baked in. Values are proto-law. Values are the place where we are still negotiating. If the negotiation is a done deal, then it can be made into a policy. So values are the place where we reverse engineer micro futures and long-term futures that we want to collectively build together, and then we keep negotiating these strategies to make these futures come true or not. We'll come to the Q&A in a moment. But I'm really glad that we are engaging people, and like everyone is like a little because we have just thrown so many premises out there that I mean this is fantastic. This is exactly why we started making Maya. We said, what does the narrative, what does the story of the 21st century look like? What are the problems of the 21st century?
And has someone done this before? This idea that we could use stories to present a value, to present a future, and from the future reverse engineer value. Has someone done this in the past? We couldn't be the first one thinking of it, and the answer is yes. Any idea what this act is called? This act of creation or this form of story is called?
World building.
Fair, but on a larger scale, where historically we have looked at a future and built value systems and used stories to propagate those value systems.
A prophecy laid down by a
Sorry?
superior being.
Prophecy is okay. What else?
Mythology.
Exactly. A mythology. Throughout history, we have civilizations, not individuals, have come together to build mythologies. They have imagined futures that are very similar to our worlds that are very similar to ours, but slightly different, so that you can enter them, find your own place in that world, while not being personally affected by the characters in that world. And then you can use these stories to debate policy, to debate ideas, to debate things that you may or may not agree with. And then we collectively take those negotiations and we start talking about, yeah, but in that story that happened, so perhaps we should go down this path if you want this future, and perhaps not go down that path if you don't want that future. That civilizational storytelling is called a mythology. Now mythologies are great because they can get the story across, but they have a problem. Most mythologies don't come with expiry date. The mythologies that we have inherited were great for the times they were written, but we live in a very different time. We don't have the same problems that the people writing the mythologies did, but those are set in stone. So each generation, each major turning point in a civilization requires a new mythology. And that's when we sat down and started building our own mythology, asking the questions, debating the problems of now, which are unique in the history of civilization. The problems that stand in front of us are unlike any problem that we have faced before, and perhaps we need to have the right stories to equip us to tell those stories, to understand those problems.
So yeah, that's really where Maya was born out of, and we said we made a long list of methods that it can work and it can go wrong, and we try to avoid all the ways that it could go wrong, and we try to build upon all the ways that it would work. And we created a community ecosystem within it. We baked in the idea that it will find you in any expression or any form or any medium that you like to use as a means of your cultural.
Yeah. Quick show of hands. How many of you consume films as your primary medium of just culture?
Experience.
It's a little higher, sorry. Yeah. How many of you use books? games. What is it? Music as a primary. So that's what's happening, right? Because media is more easily accessible and more easily created, all of us are now finding ourselves in our own pockets of comfort where we consume what the format that we like to consume. So if we were making a civilizational story, what format should it be in? Should it be a film? Should it be a book? Should it be a game? Should it be music? The answer was yes. It needs to be all of those. So we sat down, we called in every favor, we called up every friend, we called up every artist who had ever inspired us and said, we are building this and we need your help. So that was what happened 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we went down the most ridiculous world building journey that anyone had ever gone through. We hired geologists to build a planet. It was much like Earth, but not really. Then we hired evolutionary biologists to build the species of that Earth.
And to embed natural selection pressures that would justify very specific evolutionary behaviors and physiologies that would emerge on this planet. And then we said, okay, there are all these intelligent species on this planet, and they have a very different perceptual latitude. Their Umwelt, if you will, is so different from each other. If there's a species that recognizes what's happening around them through the temperatures of various bodies in their environment, and collects a sentimental cross section of the world through their heat bits. How does this species think? And if their cognition is so different from anything that we can imagine or experience, what would their language be like? How would they communicate among each other? And if that language is completely unlike anything else we have experienced, what is their culture like? What is their architecture like? Would they be building at all? Would they require? Or would they be living in the jungle? Would they need at all, would they have any desire whatsoever to kind of, to have certainty and safety for themselves? Or would they be completely comfortable living in jungle forever? We started asking a lot of fundamental questions, a lot of first principle questions about each of these species, their interactions, their histories, how they collide, how they cooperate with each other, and we created generations of their interactions.
And we wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages, not of stories, of just the rules of the world. We wanted to build a world that was as intricate as the world we live in, because we always told as storytellers to make it simple. And I think that's a large folly. We have to train ourselves in complexity, because every decision that you are making, right, from who you should marry to where you should work to who you should vote for, is a very, very complex decision with hundreds of variables. And we need to practice to deal with that complexity. So we couldn't make a world that was simplified, that was flattened, that had no nuance and complexity. We built a world as rich culturally as the world we live in. And then we made problems in that world that were similar to problems we are facing right now, and similar to problems that we think we will foresee in the next 20, 30, 40 years.
So as we started making the films, the games, graphic novels, toys, virtual reality experiences, eventually theme parks in this world, we started having a lot of really exciting problems. We said, okay, we had these wonderful concept artists from around the world working on the project. So we had people like Wayne Barlow who did all the animals of Avatar. We had studios like Veta, MPC, studios out of LA, Japan, China, New Zealand working with us on the project. And there were a lot of problems that we were just not finding answers to, like how do these individuals, these characters, these stories that we were building, how do they live? What does that world really look like? And everything that we were looking at was looking like a derivative of something that we have seen before, because it was not originating from the world. So we created a pedagogy, we created a learning system where we thought it should perhaps be something that it should be useful for us, but it should also be, if it's a learning system, it should be useful for students who will be using it. So we started asking our friends in academia what their problems were, and we started collecting a wide variety of problems that they were facing and anxieties that they were facing as teachers. And we said, okay, let's kind of create a program that solves for both. So we created we started with a speculative program which inspires young people, inspires students, undergrad students to think in first principles, build agentic models, create system scale interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary frameworks for themselves to solve extremely complex problems.
Like the real world problem that they were facing was architects would go to school, learn how to make buildings the same way architects before them were making buildings, who learned it from generations before them, and would come out in a world that had fundamentally changed, with climate change, with new materials coming out, with new problems to solve like smog. Now they didn't know how to solve this problem because they were not taught how to. They were only taught how to make a certain kind of building. What they actually should have been taught is how to think in first principles and how a house or a college or a school should be built to solve for problems of its inhabitants.
And first principles and systems frameworks. Be able to create and invent systems framework, because most problems they're going to be facing are going to be systems problems and never going to be individual problems that can be solved by individual material change or individual policy change. That kind of rhetoric can again be self-fulfilling. Like it can give the illusion that something is being solved, but nothing gets solved really, and that's what we experience constantly. So we said, okay, how do we kind of make them systems thinkers, and how do we get them to solve our design problems that even the greatest concept artists that are working with us from around the world are not able to solve for us. So that allowed us to create a program that has now been at CEPT in Ahmedabad for 3 semesters, and now has been invited to other places in the world. So Parsons, New York is going to have the same program for wearable technology, and we'll have the same program for physics, for biology, for speculative chemistry, and so on and so forth. So that's the other thing that started coming out of Maya, which started informing some of the architecture and design thinking of the world building that we were creating.
And after 3 years of doing this non-stop, our producer sat us down and she told us, guys, all this is great world building. You fulfilled your aspirations of modern day Vyas and Tolkien, but where are the stories? Where are the experiences? Where are the characters? So 2 years ago, Anand and I sat down and we started writing the first novel series in the world, started writing the first film, the first series, the first animated series, and the first game, of which the novel just launched on Kickstarter 3 months ago.
It's been 2 months only. Say.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been traveling a lot because of that, and we also had one more. We also insisted one more problem for ourselves. We said we'd never be dependent on studios. We'd never allow this project to be decided whether the world gets to see it or not. That decision to be made by 2 people sitting in a room in LA or Bombay. This is going to be decided by the community. If the community wants it, it's going to be made.
Because studio decision making leads to 2 very fundamental problems. One is that there's 2 people who are trying to hedge their bets, trying to make sure they don't do anything risky, who are deciding what the audience is ready to watch. And more often than not, almost every time, they are wrong. They have second guessed the audience, and they have undermined the audience that they are serving. The second problem is, and we have seen this happen over the last 300 years more than anything else, the ideas get colonized. You have someone with distribution, someone with the capital coming in from another country, owning the very ideas that you have come up with. And we wanted to avoid both of these. We wanted to build out of South Asia for the world, to have that cultural capital for the world, but we also wanted to take our audiences seriously, to not think that they can't deal with complexity, that things must be watered down and simplified for them. And hence, the relationship had to be from us to the audience directly. There couldn't be anyone standing in the way.
So to enable that, we produced everything that we have to produce for the next year already. So we've completely finished making 2 board games, the mechanics of 1 digital game, the screenplay, the storyboards, the concept art, the first novel, the lore book, the architecture book, the architecture framework, so on and so forth. So like just really finished a huge amount of work that usually gets done as a post thought after something works, after the first story works. And we started putting it out in the community 2 months ago. And we were told by partners, by collaborators who work with us very closely, that Game of Thrones or Harry Potter or The Witcher made about $30,000 within the first month or first year of their launch, and about $200,000 within the second year. And from there on, that's proof that there is a readership out there. There are people who are waiting to see it out there.
And ripple effects kick in, and you have a J curve for adoption, where it exponentially increases.
But we were also restless. We we thought that if great myths took 1,000 years to saturate into culture, and if Tolkien took about 100 years, and if Star Wars took 60, Harry Potter took 25, Witcher took 12, Game of Thrones took 8, surely they are learning from each other. Surely something is happening which allows for them to use each other's playbooks. So we kind of went and used their playbooks, and we said, can we do what any of these guys did in the first 2 years, within the first year? Hell, can we do it in the first month? And we proposed to the community that that's what we are setting out to do. We want about $30,000 within the first month of its launch. And the community responded, and we sold $500,000 worth of books within the first month of its pre-sales. Yeah. So the community has been very kind and generous, and that means this world has now come to life.
And what we're doing next is a new way of looking at studio-owned storytelling or copyright itself. We grow on piracy. How many of you grow on piracy? How many of you have never pirated anything in your life? Right? What's happening here? Why are we pirating things? Are we fundamentally crooked people? No. Because culture cannot be gatekept.
It's a paywall.
Exactly. And culture cannot be gatekept. Culture needs to be for the people, of the people, and most importantly, by the people. At the same time, you will see stories die out. Because the authors get old, they get irrelevant, they have lost their lost touch with reality on all the problems of people, the audiences that are consuming their work. And we said all of this is because of this very recent but draconian framework called copyright. And we said, what if we flip copyright on its head? So the first few stories, Anand and I will tell you. The next few stories, we will handpick the best artists that who we agree with, and they will tell stories in the Maya universe. This is only to show everyone the proof of concept. Set the tone, set the grammar of the world. Simultaneously, we are putting out hundreds and hundreds of pages of the rules of the world, of major events in the world. Why? Because we want all of you to start telling stories in Maya. Unlike copyright, the story you will be allowed to pick up a story and legally tell it without our prior approval. There will be a constitution of what you can and cannot do. You cannot enforce the injustices of the past. You cannot be racist and homophobic and all of that. But apart from that, you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to ask us for permission, because we are hoping that 15 years from now, 10 years from now, the best games, the best films, the best stories are not told by Anand and me. It's told by someone sitting in Nairobi who has no access to culture otherwise, picking up all the assets worth tens of millions of dollars, reconstructing them in a way that we could never see imaginable, and tell a story that resonates to the whole world. And they should be able to do that without jumping through hoops of bureaucracy or without having $1 billion in the bank.
So we did this experiment in very small ways in the last 12, 13 years of our life. When Ship came out, when Ship of Theseus came out, we put out 40 hours of its footage online for free. It's still available online, so you can make your own version of the film. We have seen many versions of Ship of Theseus.
You can take it, put it in a music video, and it's fine.
So we've been playing around. We've been toying with this idea of how to kind of make copyright equally copyleftable of sorts, and incredible results have come out of it. So this is not entirely, just kind of clarify, it's we're still within that domain. We're still working within the domain of making things large, making things at scale. This is going to be, the films are going to be as vast and as magnificent as films can be, and games are going to be as epic and large scale as games have ever been or more. But at the same time, it allows people who are going to be creating within the ecosphere of Maya. It creates a creator economy, so to speak, where people can make things within Maya using tens of millions of dollars worth of assets,
which will otherwise be rotting in a hard drive.
Yeah, and disseminate them on their own, distribute them on their own, and keep that money basically, and make profits on it. So that's really the novel framework that we're bringing to the table with when it comes to distribution and creation as well.
As a matter of fact, we've already had one story submitted by someone who's read the first 6 chapters.
Yeah.
It's a proof of concept, and this is before the book going out. I think that tell a little bit about the story, and then we can get into Q&A.
Yeah, the story itself, the first story itself from the Maya universe, very quickly.
Or maybe the prologue, the plugging into the tree.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so our planet, on the planet Name, 6 species live in a tenuous harmony. The Rakshasis, the Nags, the Garuds, the Vanas, the Gandharv, and the Manushya. Until, because they evolved differently, because they met after they had completely evolved, their ways of life are different. And that causes conflict. The conflict is not because they don't like each other's faces, it's because how they live is fundamentally different. The Manushya, which are much like the humans on earth, are at odds with the nature around them, and hence know that they must tame nature. The Rakshasi, on the other hand, have something called a malleable phenotype, which means that their body can change within their lifetime as they see fit. So if they find themselves living in swamps, they can eat a particular diet from the particular swamp and grow gills. Or if they find themselves walking in a desert, they can make themselves more attuned to the desert. Hence, the Rakshasis have evolved to know only one thing. The higher the biodiversity, the more the recipes. The more the recipes, the more the chances of survival. So Rakshasis value biodiversity over everything else, and hence find themselves at loggerheads with the Manushya. Similarly, all species have ways that they're coping with each other. Until one day, the Rakshasis come in contact with the tree. And coming in contact with the tree puts them in a dream-like hallucinatory stage. It's very real. They imagine this world where they can do anything and be anyone. And when they wake up, it's as if nothing's ever happened. So they keep entering this space, they keep plugging into this tree and keep living out their fantasies, they keep living out their aspirations, they keep fulfilling their dreams, only waking up and coming back to normal. Soon this tree spreads to the entire planet and everyone's plugging in. Everyone is living out their wildest fantasies, except a few people. These few people realize that the tree, while they are gazing into the tree is gazing into them. Not only that, the tree is very, very precise with laws of physics, chemistry, and nature. So things inside this follow the laws of physics, follow the laws of chemistry, biology, everything. So they could enter it, invent something, try and fail a million times, and wake up having knowledge of how it would work in the real world. They start inventing things. They also realize that if they meet a copy of you inside the dream, the copy will behave exactly the way you did in the real world. And they start using it to negotiate. They start using it to plan conversations, to live that one date 100 times. They come out powerful. Soon, they detach from society and start ruling from afar. They start controlling every interaction, they start controlling every invention. And unlike the despots before them, these people are worshipped. They are looked at the people who are going to deliver us from everything else. But a few people, group of people realize that they are taking more than they are giving, that they are ultimately in power. And they start working against these group of people who are now called the Divya, the enlightened ones. But the problem is, the Divya see all your dreams. Using Maya, they know your internal thoughts, they know everything you're thinking perfectly. How do you go up against an enemy who knows exactly what's going to happen next? Who has simulated every possible future? And that is the core conflict of one of the arcs in the universe.